Welcome to C302. COVID can't stop the fun and might of tech, remote gaming events. My name is Ray. I'm from Catawba College here in Salisbury, North Carolina, and I work and have worked 14 years now, just as of March 12th, at the Corrier Lindblad Library. And before that, I got my BA in sociology here at Catawba, and I am currently working on finishing my MicroMasters in instructional design and technology. I also have 24 years experience in PC repair, upgrade, consultation, miscellaneous technologies, and I have experience with youth mentoring, at-risk youth, group event programming, and different sorts of instruction. Now, here at Catawba, our campus challenge last semester, out of nowhere with no warning, after a faculty meeting, was to provide some COVID relief, recreation relief, you could say, to some students that were in quarantine. We have been very lucky here at Catawba. We haven't had any major outbreaks. We're very good with our tracking, our policies, but we did have some students in quarantine as a safety measure. So we had some, obviously, sad students that didn't have a lot to do, and we wanted to give them something to do. So originally that was the plan as it was put toward our department here at the library. And I took on the challenge since I had the most experience, the event director across campus in event planning, student events, and the residence life director really didn't have a lot of experience running those type of programs. So I kind of acted as their technology consultant and or main planning sort of partner. And the actual experience from that ended up being ground zero. There was no resources. There was nothing in any way. There wasn't anything for signing up for events that I was made privy to. I didn't know what the students had. I didn't know how well our infrastructure as far as the network would work with that particular hardware at that time, with that many users that were planned and so forth. So that was sort of where it began its initial. And from that sort of beginning, I decided first I wanted to do a Google Form survey. And that just had some basic questions. It allowed me to kind of get a measure of what we were looking at as far as hardware available, maybe software available, and possibly even some of that connectivity with the game subscriptions and so forth. And so with those results, I derived the following analysis. As you can see, first-person shooter was the game that they most wanted to play of those students that responded. RPGs, second, tabletop, strategy, and so forth. Now, the games that they wanted to play specifically of those different genres were tied in a four-way tie. You had Apex Legends, which is a type of battle royale game, sort of like a shooter battle royale that I had never played. I'd heard of, but never played. Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Dungeons and Dragons, tabletop dice and paper game, and Super Smash Brothers for the Switch in this case. And those were the top four. And as you see, there's several other games that had kind of been on the list, and I had marked, freemium. Is it free? Is it something we got to buy? Is it part of, then the issue was, well, is it part of the Game Pass and so forth for some of the different systems like the Xbox, for example, or the PlayStation 4. So after those results, we kind of got a shock because it turned out that the top type of platforms that was requested was actually Steam and Windows 10 programming events, which was interesting because we had assumed incorrectly here at the library that it would be Xbox One, PlayStation 4 maybe, but it was overwhelmingly sort of focused on that Windows gaming, which was interesting. Now, Steam can be used on other platforms, but generally, it's going to be used on a Windows machine. And I did keep the options separate, Windows 10 and Steam, because you can use other gaming portals on a Windows-based machine. So it did make a difference in some cases. And the platforms owned in this case really hit hard that it was mostly Windows 10, although there was some underreporting one of my questions early on in the Google form actually omitted switch as an option on one of the questions, and I corrected it, but by the time I corrected it, several of the students had actually responded and said, hey, switch, I do this, I want to, I have a switch. And so I had to kind of, after these results, I had to add back in switch results to kind of make it a little bit clearer, although they aren't reflected here in this option, this graph rather. So after that, we looked at gaming subscriptions. And as you see, the overwhelming no gaming subscriptions. So it was going to be hard to connect those gamers on the platforms that required a paid gaming subscription to connect, such as the Xbox Gold or, Ultra, kind of this Ultimate package, or the Nintendo Online, which you have to pay for as well. You could play free on the PS4, and you could play free on the Xbox, not the Xbox, the Windows 10, but it was going to be tricky on the other platforms. Now, overall, for the events requested, it was really seemed to be that they wanted a gaming buddy, and they wanted to do tournaments with some other events here and there. So the first thing that I went and did, along with sending that survey out over email to be filled out over Google so I could get immediate results back, the Google Forms that I put in, was to set up a private Discord server that would be made available, the private URL over Bitly, directly in that email, as well as on any marketing materials, posters, the digital signage and so forth that they're able to see in the cafeteria, in different buildings on campus, just looking at the website in some instances and so forth. And in this case, Discord really proved instrumental. It was really useful because it allowed us to gather some of those most active, engaged, proactive students that were really wanting to do these different gaming events, had been waiting for us to do gaming events on campus, more aligned with what sort of, platforms and things they had interest in, which we hadn't really done before, except for instances of maybe, say, a club or a private event with some just interested students, or maybe something to do with our e-games sort of, they've done a couple events with that. So I chose to empower student admins, and I let those students that had interest in certain areas become an admin in different areas to help plan those type of events in some cases. And it worked out really well. Now, after we got that information and I was able to share it with the other two departments, we started to plan events. We started to see what we had resource-wise as far as maybe prizes and so forth, and to see what we could do within the technology. So I would say if you're doing this from with no money, it's never been done before in your organization or campus, whatever the case may be, use the recommendations from the students as much as possible to keep them engaged, because the engagement, as you'll see later, is one of the hardest things to kind of work toward maintaining, that momentum, as it were. Factor in the technology, if there's limitations, work around those, or plan to address those in some way. In this case, since we're dealing with the COVID pandemic, safety first. So if there are in-person events, make sure that you're properly distanced and so forth, obviously masked, and sanitizing things if there's any touch points involved. And try to plan it to the best fit of what everybody is able to do, so you can be inclusive as possible for different neglected populations on campus, whether that be interest-wise or some sort of accessibility issue. Generally, if they do play that console, they have a way to play that console with maybe a modified controller or with some sort of device, or even on their computer. So make sure that kind of play with your strengths, not against your strengths, and try to make, something totally new in that case. And then, of course, do dry runs of the technology, make sure things are going to work. And those that you see, simple posters, and the other one is just something that was in the Google form to advertise as they signed up. Then you basically run the events. The first 2 nights, we did a week, kind of like a pumpkin themed event for Halloween last semester. And we did Mario Kart and Smash Brothers the first 2 nights. I actually brought in a Switch that I had recently purchased, and we hooked it up to a smart board, and we were able to connect remotely, but none of the players that were available for Nintendo Online were able to play due to their schedules. So we ended up just playing with some people in person, distanced with their own controllers or sanitized controllers that were only used once in that case. In the second event, the third event actually, the third night, Jackbox Party Pack was played over Steam, and it was a Steam machine going to, well, it was a Windows machine going to a Surface hub for the display, and it was also screencasting over Discord, so they could hear the audio, they could see the questions, they were involved, and they could actually participate over audio chat, which worked out really well. Now, after those 3 events, we did have some questions come up because they had wanted to do the Apex Legends tournament. Well, it turns out you can't just do an Apex Legends tournament within the current specs of how the system works as an online multiplayer game. So we tried to go and get a tournament, especially from EA. Worked out really well, although it turned out they overlooked, there was some miscommunication. They don't actually do cross-platform codes at the moment. So we planned our whole thing, had prizes set up, bought e-cards, all that, got all the students all hyped up to play this. We were going to do a thing with alumni, with faculty, staff, everything. I mean, even people in the community, because we were going to have so many seats available on these servers. Like, they were going to give us 4 servers. Turns out that wasn't going to work with cross-platform, which was the whole way in the nutshell we were going to have to run it. You know, some people on the PS4, some people on the Xbox One, some people on, say, their Switch, whatever, you know. And so it kind of crumbled at the last minute, was not able to be an event that we were able to run at the last minute when they really worked through that and they explained how the codes work. Just failed, just unraveled. So from that debacle, I kind of had to plan, well, what could work? What do we have available? What do we have the money for within the budget that I was allotted by student events? And, you know, we looked at Dungeons and Dragons, remote card game options, which there are a lot of those, obviously, you can connect your students with. And then murder mysteries and so forth, which we have tried to do some this semester as well with limited success. And so we focused on trying out a demo session of Dungeons and Dragons, a form of the tabletop RPGs that I had mentioned earlier, dice and paper usually, you know, rolling dice and so forth, having your character sheet. And I went with the Roll20 platform since I had the most familiarity with that as a free platform, a virtual tabletop, as it were, running my own private dungeon master sort of, you could say, adventures. I would kind of control things for my friends and over Discord audio. So I did what I knew. And a couple of the students had heard of Roll20, had seen it loosely, but hadn't really used it that much. But they were very familiar with Discord, so it worked out well in that case. And I opted just to design something quick as opposed to purchasing something because it just made more sense to try to fit that within that hour block that we were aiming for. So the first step, and when you're trying to work with Roll20, is to get your map background. You're able to kind of switch between your different screens, as it were, and each of those screens can have a different map. You could have multiple maps kind of sitting next to each other and just move your screen around and all that. It just depends how you want to do it. I went simple because it was an hour session with me controlling the characters that were on screen, with them telling me what to do with those characters, since it was going to be too much of a, you know, time sink to try to have them learn how to control it on their devices. And set up free accounts and all that. So first I took the map, I cropped it out and made a nice, easy kind of pit, pulled that into a map layer. And then you were able to decide, well, what do you want on that map? Well, in this case, I wanted some panels that would act as kind of like triggers for a puzzle. And I wanted some hidden items. I wanted a blood stain, and I wanted some bricks over there on that right side, as you can see. And the next thing I needed to do was put some non-playable characters, NPCs, and some enemy monsters on the board, on the map, that the players would be able to see and would be able to interact with. And as you see, I put some 12 armor class kind of diseased rats. They had 7 hit points each, so not too bad, but there's a ton of them over there. And there's an invisible Allosaurus that's trying to bump through. Every 10 minutes, he gets one chance, and I roll the dice to see if he gets through with a high enough number. And there's a couple characters, Killian Slime in the right corner that I controlled, and a dead body that was kind of, looks like it had been crawled from the bloodstain in that instance. And then once you get the NPCs, you're able to do the player characters. So in this case, I just dragged some random characters I thought my players would like as tokens, made them all the same size, and had them ready so that players could, when they got there, pick out a player to use as their own character and go from there, whether they signed in over Discord and just connected with audio, or they were there in person to see the big smartboard screen mirroring my display, except it only showed, it only showed the player's Killian Slime's view. It didn't show the DM's view, which is Raybird in this case. So I had to clone the character, and I made just one character that was all the same. 12 armor class, which is actually the same as the rat in this case. 15 hit points, so a few more hit points than the rats. And then basic specs and a basic attack, which in this case is a punch and kick, 1d4 blunt. And as you see, there's an example of Mr. Tusk, dapper fellow there, rolling to attack a rat, and he rolled a 4. He needed to get a 12 to match that armor class to make a hit. No dice, so he did not hit it, and he was not able to do the 2 blunt damage to the rat that he had hoped to. So I cloned that character sheet and attach that to those icons that you saw on the previous screen. And there you go. You've got 10 characters ready to go. Just change the name on each of the clones. So after that, we ran the demo session, and it ended up having 6 players. We would have had 7 because there was another faculty member, but she had something come up at the last minute. She would have also been over Discord. Those 6 players, it ended up being 1 was faculty, 1 was staff, and 4 were students. And with 5 here in person, socially distanced, as we do here on campus, and 1 over Discord with audio. The only downside being that my phone that I was using for a mic died, and we had to switch up to a different mic for like 15 minutes of that hour. And that Discord user was able to see the same video that everyone else was able to see, and they were able to hear audio and so forth, so it worked out fairly well for that. Now, the results, I would say it was an A+. Nobody died, although our director, the faculty member here at the library, he was bitten by a rat and missed his roll. He failed his roll, and he got plague, but he was carried out by a student. So we're going to say he got medical attention in time because he had to do it within like 48 hours in the game or something like that. And they worked together as a team. It was solved, and it made a successful event. 4 or 5 gaming events that were planned held successfully. Now, we did have some free-form events that kind of developed over the time from last semester, this semester here. Sometimes people would say, hey, I want to play some Among Us, which is a game that's cross-platform, so we would play Among Us. Sometimes they would play some other game on one of the other platforms whenever their schedule allowed. And I did survey the players just to see what they liked or didn't like, and 4 of 6 had never played before, and they said Roll20 is split between 4 and 5, so pretty good results that they thought it worked out pretty well, was immersive, and they enjoyed it. And as you can see, Roll20 it can do a lot. It's free, and it does have pro features that let you do other things, but there you go, all kinds of quotes. It was awesome, so engaged. I love to see where my character was and so forth. So it really helped kind of give that visual sense of what was going on for them. And considerations, obviously, engagement's always going to be an issue on campus or within an organization. Communication issues persist. I mean, we were using email sometimes, but mostly Discord whenever we could. EA's issue was bad, of course, for us. And you can see some of those other considerations. They're pretty straightforward. So I thank you. and I hope you have a great day.